Good morning, friends. Hey, I haven't even had my cup of coffee yet, so this is a bit unusual to be coming to the journal. Uh, but I wanted to share some ponderings with you. Lately, I've been having odd sensations at the top of my head or in the third eye area. And, it's interesting. And I'm stepping into a different relationship with the mind also. And some things are just beginning to become clear for me. You know how I've said now and again and behaved now and again as the fool, said I felt uh, foolish and nonsensical. Um, Being empty is an interesting thing, and it also means you're empty of thought. Thought isn't in the driver's seat anymore. Um, and so that's a really radically different space for most people to take. Um, I no longer really know what it looks like from the outside because I just don't choose to spend time in mind and mind's perspectives very much anymore. I work with them when I contact them in the minds of people I'm dealing with. And I'm very willing to grapple with mind in that way. But it's in my now when I'm doing that. And anytime it's not in my now, I'm just not interested. I'm really not. So be in heart to listen. What came to me this morning was that this last period of several years, you know that tarot deck, there's a card in there called the Fool, and he's hanging upside down from the branch of a tree. Now, I'm no expert in tarot. I know precious little about it, but just the concept of that is what captures me. To go forward in life, not relying on mind, uh, could be seen as the definition of foolish or of a fool. Who doesn't do what mind would think or expect him to. So, um, in my close call recently with someone so strongly in mind, it was amazing. I found out what it was like to be judged. Now, judgment is very definitely a quality of mind. It's something that mind does, and I suppose it needs to do in order to make decisions. You judge between this and that. But mind carries it too far, believing that there is a right and wrong, a good and a bad, and not seeing the beauty in everything. You can make decisions, you can make choices without this energy of judgment. Have you ever, as a for instance, written a comment on a video somewhere only to be blasted by somebody else coming in and absolutely judging you and, slinging words around, calling you names, that kind of thing? It's a real conversation stopper. And to me, it's an ugly energy. And it's an energy that can kill. It can't kill you. I mean, you're eternal. That's not possible. But it can kill spirit when little children are judged and condemned. Look at the lifelong results of that. Judgment is really a vicious energy. And it's interesting too, because the one that blasts you for your comment, that's a conscious decision to do that. I want to totally distinguish between that and the one who was judging me, because she was doing that completely not intending to be judgmental. This was just her best estimate based on her path of what was going on with me. So there was no intent to judge. And yet, I will say there was a certain element of disdain, of a looking down, of that's lesser, that's not good enough, that kind of thing. Now, I guess I can't and don't choose to get in her shoes enough to really empathize with that. I mean, I went through that already. I really set my whole path aside. The things that were nearest and dearest to me, as far as even my reason for being, in order to have a look at them from this other perspective. I think I've seen enough of that, at least for now. So I'm not going there right now. But I do want to speak out and ask us to watch and observe when we're judging. You see, we all have a dark side. And if we can just admit this and just allow it to be, just accept that it is, then your watching and observing is far more powerful. Because if we think we're perfect or too good or something like that, then our beliefs crowd out our ability to see clearly. And so, as we don't want to be judged, as we don't like that feeling, let's try not to put any more judgment out into the world and change the world that way. Okay, now I'm going to read a journal for you and then maybe talk about it. And it was this yogi who made this comment. Everything causes everything. Do you think so? You know, they talk about the butterflies' wings flapping in Asia and causing the hurricane elsewhere. And everything is linked up. Everything is connected. So, but it bothered me because it was given as a reason to say, therefore, nothing causes anything. Therefore, therefore, there's no causation. And so this written journal is kind of my meditation on that. It was written 10:4. The Mayan day was 2 wisdom. Everything causes everything, or nothing causes anything. Is that so? If we say that everything is connected, we speak truly. When all is one, how could it be otherwise but connected, right? Thus do some argue for the flutter-by wings in Asia touching off a storm in the USA or elsewhere. Well, anything is possible, but let's go deeper. This week, I heard someone argue that causality could not exist for the reason that simply everything being the way that it is causes everything else, that nothing can be isolated out in the united whole. And that is interesting. I dropped it into heart to await its return into my conscious awareness. And that return is happening now. You know, friends, the mind is a wily character. It must be watched alertly. Watch and observe is a fine directive to implement, but when watching the mind, let vigilance be double. Trust absolutely nothing produced by the mind. While the mind does its best to sort things out in 3D, yet it is not well equipped to evaluate its own work. That is left for the being to do, preferably from deep center, from what I call heart. Nothing causes anything, or everything causes everything. Interesting. Another way this could be supported is with the understanding that time, as we have understood it, is false. From a different perspective, all time is concurrent. It is just now or simultaneous. Thus, in this picture, one could say that there is no causation. Would one be correct? I don't know yet. I'm exploring. Here is an issue I have found consistently. Things uttered from heart space are misunderstood by the mind, roughly 100% of the time. That must also be taken into account. Now, I don't know whether this statement about there being no causation was spoken from heart originally. I'm not aware of this argument's origin or its history. This recent hearing was my first encounter with the idea. Most statements depend on perspective. They are relative. If we limit our view to strictly 3D, then perhaps the no causation statement is ridiculous. We know fire burns. We know apply an axe to a tree and it will be cut down. We know many things that consistently seem to cause other things. That's how 3D works. If I didn't know that my consistent work would produce a consistent paycheck, I wouldn't work. We know stop signs are for stopping, and so on. So, let us set aside for the moment things that require an act of will to operate, such as working for a paycheck, stopping at a stop sign, and the like. Let's just look at the involuntary. Now, fire burns no matter what your will is regarding it, for the most part. I mean, there is always the odd exception, like the yogi walking on coals, but let's leave that alone for the moment. Does fire really burn? How can we say it does not? Perhaps this is not what is meant by this no causation statement. I guess I'll have to explore it a little bit further. Right now, one thing that comes to me is that this no causation argument would be a convenient excuse for inaction. With it, we give over free will, do we not? How can we be sovereign if we're in charge of simply nothing? If everything is caused by simply everything else, then are we not automatons? Is the cosmos like some big wind-up toy? How is it not, based on this argument? It all becomes automatic. To say that everything is related, is interconnected, would be more accurate than implying universal causation. It just means all is connected. To influence something doesn't mean to cause it. On the surface of it, this non-causation argument looks like a good excuse for non-action. Why do anything? You'll just mess up everything, which knows quite well what it is doing. Yeah, right. Where go from here? Maybe it's a bit like the thing with hierarchy. There are those who believe, and strongly, that there is no hierarchy anywhere. All is equal, all is one, and there's no room in their version of reality for hierarchy to have any being, any value. Okay, that's how they look at it. How do I see it? On one level, that other argument works. Everything, everyone, every being is equal. Only that's not the whole story. Plus, that can be badly misunderstood, like so many things can and are. There are those who set the life of a toad or an animal as equal to the life of man and woman. Then they act on that. And it can get pretty ugly in its outcome. People suffering because some particular species of toad is growing rarer where they live, so they can't build or even live there anymore. And this is of questionable benefit to the toad anyway. I'm sure there are other ways to encourage it to blossom and repopulate. This one is often just dumb in its implementation, though not always. Again and again, I see good ideas that come from heart misunderstood, misapplied. It gets down to the mind trying to implement something of heart, and yet mind cannot understand heart. It can't even get in there with its thoughts into that province of heart. So, how is mind to carry out ideas that come from heart? It makes a mess. People go along many times because they don't know what else to do. They know there's a problem and they know the idea being implemented has good intent behind it. So they acquiesce. Too bad. Hopefully, more and more of us will be living in heart. From there, we can see much more clearly when something is just off. It will feel wrong, like the way people understand or don't this everything causes everything idea. Sure, we're all interwoven. Sure, everything you think, do, and say affects me, and vice versa, affects all life everywhere. You may not know that, but I do. It does. Now, that doesn't mean sit back and do nothing and just say everything is okay. Anything at all that has us not following the guidance of our heart, in my book, is not wise. If everything just let everything go, not recognizing any level of causation anywhere, what would come? What would happen? Can you imagine? Now, my hope is that I misunderstood the speaker's meaning, who said there's no use looking for individual causation because it doesn't occur. The whole web causes everything, not one piece. Well, sure it does, but it does so through the actions of each piece, and adjustments can be made. And when they arise from heart and are implemented that way, they can bring blessings that are simply huge. So, I guess at this point I haven't come to any final conclusions about this statement. Perhaps someone can comment me with a reference or idea about where this idea arose. Maybe you can show me what is meant by it. Beyond our oneness, of course, which is obvious. Everything causes everything. So let's do nothing. Let's take no responsibility for our part in the play. Let's blame life. I don't think so. No thanks. And so that was the fourth, and this is the 14th. So it's had a little more time to percolate in there. And what I see now is individual responsibility is key. We're at a certain stage in the play, the drama that is life. And there are things that are appropriate for this stage that may bleed away and become non-entities later on. That's fine. We've got to stick with our now. What's relevant to our now? And what I see is that people have been walking around asleep, myself included, for a very, very, very long time. That has been built into the way things have been run. But that's whatever the mechanisms were that were used to keep us hypnotized and sleepwalking, they're not working. And we're waking up anyway. Frequencies are rising around here, and we're coming out of the hypnosis. And one of the first things that's necessary is that each one begin to take responsibility for everything in your own sphere, your own circle of being. You have to take responsibility and quit all of the blaming. There's no blame to be laid anywhere when we look at things from heart. We see and we realize that we're working with higher self. Well, you don't even need any spirituality. You can use the superconscious, the subconscious, the unconscious, the conscious, and the superconscious mind, even, to say that looked at from that perspective, which all of us contact as our frequency rises. things look much different. And we realize from higher aspects of ourself, we've been creating this drama. And we're creating what we needed to create in order to wake ourselves up. We needed to wake up. And apparently it took something really horrible. It took the world to get into a god-awful mess in order to do it. Well, if it accomplishes what it set out to do, which is to wake us all up, I say that's fine, you know. Um, Now, I know for a lot of you, I'm so far out on a limb here, but I trust that most of those have already, clicked the stop button and gone to look at something else. This is just heart perspective. And what I am finding, at least, is that all this while that I've been playing the fool by really not connecting with mind, not working with it, not letting it lead me in any way. And so I've walked off into the void in the way I've been living my life, into a real not knowing. Not knowing what has been the keynote for quite some time. And what I think I'm experiencing now is a more of an integration with mind. Higher mind, lower mind. I mean, these are just words, folks. It is so challenging sometimes to put this stuff into words. But I think it's possible that I may be integrating and changing in that way. How are the changes working for you with where your path has been and where it is now and where you feel it's going? Talk to you again soon.